that you knew. I don't see nobody that I know. People who know you, you know them, know your mama, know your daddy, know your brothers, know where you live, know y'all had a black dog one time. I'm talking about those people. I'm talking about people you did your first communion with, and the people that would tell your mom if you did something wrong. You would never see them again. So, who am I? I don't know.
Here is the identity crisis. Not in the parking lot, begging for food. She just didn't know till she got home to New Orleans that there is no chance of being who she was before. Jean's house is completely rebuilt. Like other houses here I've seen, it kind of looks like a Pottery Barn showroom. Not lived in for very long, new matching furniture. Nice, though spacious. She's still working for the city. She has a new husband now. The husband she made it through the storm with, he died in 2007. Now she's married to the son of Mercy D, Mercedes, the bar owner. And she has this new big family to go with him. They gather at Mercedes' bar almost every day. And so it's like, yeah, you have a new life, but it looks like a good life. Is it a good life?
Looks so deceiving. You make do with what you have. And you try every day to get that other life back. Yes, every day. Every day. But it's not coming back. But that's okay, tomorrow coming. I ought to be able to get some little piece of it. And if tomorrow coming, it doesn't come back.
Zoe Chase is one of the producers of our show. Coming up, drive your Chevy to the levee, to where the levee was not dry. That's in a minute. When our tour of the Lower Ninth continues, WBEZ Chicago, when our program continues.
The worst part of slavery might not have been the forced labor.
The great evil of American slavery, for me, is the narrative of racial difference we created during that era. The ideology of white supremacy, which was not addressed by the 13th Amendment.
Brian Stevenson, author of Just Mercy, on The Brian Lehrer Show. Next time, Kurt Anderson from Studio 360 on designing a new symbol for the American South. The Brian Lehrer Show, weekdays at 10 a.m. on WNYC.
WNYC receives support from LegalZoom, supporting small business owners for over 10 years, with services including business formations and corporate filings, plus independent professionals providing contract review and tax advice. Legal help is at LegalZoom.com. The Charles H. Repson Foundation, because a great city needs an informed and engaged public. More information at repsonfoundation.org.
This American Life, I'm Ira Glass. Today in our program, we have a tour of the Lower Ninth Ward, the part of New Orleans that has come back the least since Hurricane Katrina hit 10 years ago this week. We arrived at the third stop at our tour, the corner of Jordan Avenue and North Prior Street, right across from one of the levees that collapsed a decade ago. If you stand here facing south with the levee to your right, well, first of all, this is the part of town where Brad Pitt built a bunch of houses with the Make It Right Foundation after the storm, and you see some of those right in front of you. They're boxy and modern. Lots of them have solar panels. There are also a couple of regular houses on the street, some overgrown yards. The levee itself across from those houses is a grassy embankment with a 14-foot concrete wall at the top. And most people you talk to down here will tell you the same thing about what happened right here at this spot on the levee on August 29, 2005.
It was dynamited in 6 places on the Industrial Canal. They got people that live on this street will go to their grave and tell you that they heard the dynamite.
And they heard the explosion, and then the water started coming up the streets. That's just to keep the water from going downtown Bourbon Street. No, they didn't get no water. They just blew the damn thing and sent it this way.
Lots of people heard an explosion, and lots of people say it was the government. The government blew up the levees to get black people out of the lower ninth. Lucrease Phillips lived on the other side of the canal, and she said flooding had started that morning, but it wasn't much, like as high as your car tires.
Then all of a sudden we hear a boom, like the windows were sucked out. Now we have them taped and all, so they wanted to blast, but they couldn't. After the boom, then the water went from the tire of the car to the second floor so fast. I think they blew the levees, and they redirected the water from downtown.
In the last decade, there's been a ton of investigation into what caused this boom and what blew up the levees. The big official investigations did not find evidence of dynamite, of anybody blowing up the levees on purpose. So the question is, what made the boom? Well, the consensus is that it was not one boom. There were lots of booms, coming from a few different sources, like, for instance, when the levee on the north side of the lower Ninth Ward cracked and toppled over at 4 or 5 in the morning of the storm. That would have made a huge boom, like a thick branch snapping in half, and then water would have rushed in. Other booms came from electrical transformers blowing up, and from a massive barge that banged against the industrial canal levee later that morning, like somebody beating on a huge empty steel trash can, one expert told me, until it came over the levee and landed in the lower ninth. But it's also clear that people aren't crazy to believe that the levees were dynamited by the government. They believe that for some very good reasons. For starters, the government's done it before.
That is very real. It very much happened. And you combine that with the sound of the boom, and it's not surprising that that theory has life.
John Barry has served on the levee board responsible for protecting New Orleans, the Southeast Louisiana Flood Protection Authority East. But he's a journalist, and before that he wrote a great book called Rising Tide about the 1927 flood that caused more devastation than Katrina did, and that led city officials to decide that they were going to save downtown New Orleans by blowing up the levees in an area where poor people lived, a spot that's just a 20-minute drive from the lower ninth. All this with the consent of the governor, federal government, and the president.
They had to promise to pay full reparations to everyone who was damaged. 95% of the people who ended up being flooded out by this dynamiting were white. But they had no political power. Many of them didn't speak English. They spoke an 18th century Spanish. They were referred to as Leños. Most of them came from the Canary Islands. It was dynamited.
And it was kind of hard to do, right?
It was very difficult to do. That was a very good levee. And,
They just had to keep going back and blowing it up again and again.
That's correct.
How many people were displaced?
Roughly 10,000.
And did the government pay reparations?
Well, it was the city of New Orleans that was supposed to pay the reparations, and the city pretty much stiffed everyone who they had made promises to.
There's another good reason that people believe the government wanted them out and blew up the levees to do it. Gwen Adams, who you heard at the beginning of the show, talked to me about this. It's a more immediate reason, a more personal reason.
It's so believable because when people were interested in coming back to see what they needed to do in order to rebuild, they said, you can't do that because we're going to green space this area. We wanted to come back and see what our property looked like. They held us off at gunpoint. When you attempted to get permits to rebuild, they fought you tooth and nail at City Hall with permitting for every little thing.
FEMA housing money was distributed with a formula that made it harder for families in the lower ninth to rebuild. City services, running water, schools, arrived so much later in the lower ninth. In other words, it's the things that the city and state did after the flood that made the idea that the government just wanted everybody out, and it might have blown up the levees to achieve that. Seems so very credible. Okay, we were at the 4th stop in our tour of the lower ninth, Royal Street. So if you get on Royal Street and go as far east as it goes, stop where it dead ends by that 6-foot-high chain link fence. And as you stand here facing east, you can look through the fence and do that now, you see the remains of the Holy Cross School. And you can see it was once a beautiful old Southern school, 3 stories with columns and balconies and curved brickwork. Now left here basically to rot. Look, the windows are boarded up and there's a bright blue tarp on the roof that's ripping into shreds. It's been up there so long. There's some kind of scary looking black mold that I think I see peeking through the bricks. What you're looking at right now, believe it or not, is the site of one of the big gentrification fights in the lower 9th. This last year, a developer has been trying to build an upscale high-rise here. Condos, 7 stories tall, hundreds of apartments and offices, a huge parking lot in a neighborhood. Again, look around. It's almost entirely family houses, just 1 or 2 stories tall. And whether or not this gets built, newcomers are moving into this area, especially this part of the ward. You remember Kirk Washington? Remember from the beginning of the show? He lives just a couple blocks from here. And across the street from him, a white couple moved in. And his friend Isaac's old house. And he likes him. He likes him a lot. Says hello.
What's fine? Hey, Wash, how you doing? All right. That's the house that Isaac, he drowned right there in that house right there.
The couple going into the house are Simon Hand and his wife, Sarah DeBacher. She's active in the local neighborhood association and popular enough that they elected her vice president and then they elected her president. But it's complicated, being, you know, sort of the face of the changing lower 9th. When our producer, Sean Cole, talked to Sarah.
Even though she thinks about race, her race, all the time, Sarah DeBacher is still figuring out how to talk about it. She can have a hard time getting through a sentence without stopping to comment on what she's saying. Like when I asked her why she moved to the lower 9th ward after the storm.
Maybe some of it had to do with guilt and wanting, God, this is sounding gross, wanting to be part of helping in a meaningful way to rebuild.
Which, on the one hand, is noble, of course. But on the other hand, in helping to rebuild a neighborhood that was 88% black before the hurricane, Sarah's worried she'll come across as some white savior asshole.
My role as I don't even want to say my role, who I am as a white newcomer to the lower 9th ward, that identity has been an uncomfortable one for me.
Newcomer should probably be in quotes. Sarah's lived in the lower 9th ward since 2008, so about 3 years after the hurricane. Before that, Sarah and Simon were living upriver from the lower 9th, in the Marigny neighborhood next to the French Quarter. But when they decided to buy a house, the Marigny wasn't an option, because after Katrina, it was suddenly totally unaffordable for them. Katrina had a gentrifying effect on a lot of the city. First came the YURPs, or Young Urban Rebuilding Professionals, and after they helped put the city back together, another wave of entrepreneurs and tech workers and creative economy types came in. Sarah and Simon are both teachers, and the lower 9th ward was more in their price range. Besides which, they liked it there.
I don't want to romanticize some of the because neighbors talk to each other but I mean, that's part of it.
They actually started going to community meetings even before they moved to the lower 9th ward. And ultimately, they bought a $50,000 double shotgun house, financed by an FHA loan for first-time homebuyers, and knocked out the middle wall that separated the 2 apartments. As you're more than aware by now, people in the lower 9th ward are friendly. And they were friendly to Sarah and her husband. But there was definitely a what are you doing here type vibe in the beginning, and even a few years in. She remembers this one night, after her first son was born. It was late, maybe 11 o'clock, and these kids down the way started setting off fireworks.
And my son had colic, and so I was in the trenches with this baby who never stopped crying, and he was asleep, and then these fireworks started going off, and I went out and first talked to the kids and just said, hey, can you maybe do that another time?
Mm-hmm.